Welcome to the Flourish Frequency, the show where we activate and amplify the frequencies of success, joy, and abundance. I'm your host, Beth Larsen, a high-performance and quantum success coach. If you're ready to ditch the hard hustle and embrace a more effortless flow, then this is the show for you. Together, we'll tap into quantum thinking, harness the laws of the universe, and unlock the secrets to living a life of more. More joy, more energy, more passion, more money, and more meaning. No more simply surviving, we're going beyond thriving. It's time to flourish. The Flourish Frequency Show starts now. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome today on this beautiful day that is smack dab in between the new moon yesterday and the spring equinox tomorrow. So I think it's a perfectly appropriate time for us to be having this topic today. Excuse me, but before we dive into today's topic, I just want to invite you here to land with me and close your eyes for a moment. Let's just do a little bit of a visualization. And just imagine that you are standing at a window and it's early morning. The sky outside it's that particular shade of gray that makes it impossible for you to tell if it's 6 a.m. or if it's 9 a.m. You've got the wind picking up. There are bare branches on the trees in the yard, and they're bending, not gently like they do on a summer evening, but hard, insistently, like the weather is trying to make a point. And somewhere in your chest, you recognize the feeling. Not the feeling of the weather itself, but the feeling of restlessness, of uncertainty. The outer uncertainty and the restlessness that you're seeing in the outside world is something that you're familiar with on the inside. It's a sense that something is shifting, and maybe you can't name what that is just yet, but you know that you're being asked to move forward into something. And your path ahead isn't fully visible just yet. It could be a decision that you've been circling. It could be a version of your life that keeps pulling at you. It could be, something that you want to build, or something that you want to become, or something that you want to let go of. And you can't tell if this resistance that you're feeling, if it's coming from wisdom or if it's coming from fear. And maybe the world outside your window, and I'm not just talking about the weather here, but the actual world has been feeling just like this a lot lately too. Like there's noise everywhere you look. And it's really hard to get a clear signal for yourself about moving forward. If any of this is resonating, you're exactly where you need to be right now. Because today we're going to be talking about what happens when the storm arrives, or storms, why those storms show up, why they come, what they're actually asking of us, and how we can find our way through the storms, not by fighting them, but by moving with them. So welcome to the Flourish Frequency Show. I am so glad you're here. I'm your host, and this is the show where we activate your energy and we amplify your life, not by pretending that everything is fine, not by pretending that the storms in life don't exist, but by getting really honest about what growth looks like from the inside out. And this episode is titled In Like a Lion, Out Like a Lamb, Navigating Chaos into Clarity. And I was really inspired with the title from my own growing up here in the Midwest. If any of you out there listening, if you grew up in the Midwest or anywhere with seasons, you know that this feeling. The month starts off with howling winds and gray skies, thunderstorms, sometimes even tornadoes. I remember every year growing up in elementary school and high school that we had to do tornado drills. And so every year we were prepared for just the chaoticness that would start the month off. And then somewhere mid-month, things would start to change. You would start to see the daffodils and the crocuses popping up out of the ground. You'd start to hear the birds chirping again. And then spring would arrive. And a softness is how the month would end. The storms were real, and so was what comes after them. And today's episode is really built around that same idea, because what I want you to really remember here with this episode is that the storm is not the end of the story. It never is. So what we're going to cover here today, and I do have to just say I'm going to take a couple of sips here today, because with spring, my allergies have arrived. So I have a little bit of a raspy voice here today. So bear with me here if I take a few sips. What we're going to talk about why the storm arrives in the first place. What's actually happening in your brain and in your nervous system when chaos shows up. Why it tends to hit the hardest exactly when you're on the edge of something that's really meaningful. We're going to explore what begins to organize the storm. What begins to take the chaos and turn it into clarity for yourself, and how vision and desire and direction of your attention and intention can start turning that chaos into clarity for you, and what that process actually looks like in real life. And we're going to talk about anchoring, what it means to stay grounded in your purpose when your mind is stormy and the outer world is stormy. How the most resilient people, what I call meta leaders, don't avoid the wave. Instead, they learn how to ride the wave. By the end of this episode, my hope is that you understand something fundamental, that the storm does not mean that you're off track. Often it means exactly the opposite, that you're on track and you're about to move through something that really matters. So have you ever noticed that the chaos outside of us, it has a way of landing inside of us? And I think that most of us have probably felt this in a very personal way lately. We have a news cycle that will not quit. We've got economic uncertainty that touches real lives in real ways. We have a sense that things that we thought were solid, systems and structures and stories that we were told about how the world works, all of them cracking wide open right now. And on top of that, many of us are navigating our own personal storms simultaneously. There could be uncertainty in our work, uncertainty in our relationships, uncertainty in our sense of direction and where we're going. It can feel like a lot, because it is a lot. And I've noticed this with my clients, that when the outer world gets loud, something happens inside of us. Suddenly it becomes harder to think clearly. It becomes harder to access the part of yourself that usually feels grounded and sure. It becomes harder to make decisions from a place of wisdom rather than reaction. And it doesn't mean that you're weak when this happens, right? That's what I see people tend to when this happens, when they start to get confused or feeling like that they're losing clarity, or they feel like everything's foggy, that they're taking it as a sign of weakness. And that's not true at all. What's happening is it's our nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do. And we'll get into the nervous system and the neuroscience here in a moment. But what I really want to start with here is the insight that can really shift and change that perspective. The more we try to control the outer chaos, the louder the inner chaos gets. We exhaust ourselves trying to manage the unmanageable, trying to fix what's outside of us before we tend to what's inside of us. But if we flip that around, when we focus inward first, when we learn to anchor inside of ourselves, then something shifts. And we stop being tossed around by every wave out there, whether it's the waves in the personal life or the waves collectively in the world. We start being able to hold steady and to think clearly and to act with intention, even when the storm outside has not yet passed. What I want you to remember is that the outer world doesn't have to calm down for you to find your clarity again. And you do not need your circumstances to change in order to change how you're experiencing your circumstances. So let's talk about what's happening neurologically, because when you understand this really kind of helps, like I said, to shift the perspective here. Uncertainty is not a new thing for us, and it's not unique to these times that we're living in. Our human brains evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in an environment where uncertainty was the norm, and it often meant danger. If your ancestors heard an unexpected sound in the night, that their brain didn't have the luxury of pausing to consider all the possible explanations. It had one job to do, and that was to keep you alive. And the fastest way to do that was to just automatically assume threat and then respond immediately. And this wiring still lives inside all of us every single day. Our brain has a built-in threat detection system. Most people would refer to it as the fight or flight response. It operates faster than your conscious thought. Before you've fully processed what's happening, your body is already preparing to respond. Your heart rate increases, your breath gets shallow, and the thinking part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part that's responsible for creativity and perspective and clear decision making, it starts to go offline. And here's something that's really interesting that I found, because I'm a breathwork facilitator. And one of the things that we do in breathwork journeys is we intentionally try to shut down the prefrontal cortex. We intentionally try to move the brain out of that overactive beta brainwave, the one that is the critical thinking, and calm it down into the alpha and then the theta brainwave state so that we can access the subconscious and the unconscious and get in there. But what's interesting is that when we're doing it in an environment like a breathwork journey, we're using the breath as the tool to do that. And so rather than having the prefrontal cortex go offline with a shallow breath, you're doing it with a deep breath. And what happens when you breathe really deep, when you breathe deep in through the nose and you send that breath all the way down through the lower lungs and into the lower belly, that you're actually activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest system. So it's in this state where you are taking the brain out of the overly critical state and at the same time activating parasympathetic nervous system, that you're able to actually get in there and affect change. So what I'm talking about here about when our prefrontal cortex goes offline, it's different when it's going offline with shallow breathing and when you're in that state of fight or flight versus when you're doing it with deep breathing and you're actually letting the body go into parasympathetic, the rest and digest. So here's the critical piece though that I want to come back to here. Your brain cannot always tell the difference between a physical threat and an emotional threat. Between a predator that's sitting in the bushes waiting to jump you and a difficult conversation. Between actual danger and just the uncertainty of building something new and going somewhere new with your life that you haven't yet gone before. To the nervous system, that uncertainty will feel like danger. So when you start to step towards something unfamiliar, that new direction, that bigger vision, that bigger version of your life that doesn't yet exist, that version 2.026 that we talked about a couple of episodes ago, right? When you're doing that, your brain can interpret that movement as risk and it responds accordingly. And it gets loud and it generates doubt and it pulls up every possible worst case scenario and it presents them to you as facts. This is what the storm of the mind actually is. It's not a sign that you're making a mistake. It's actually a sign that you're moving. So it's really important to understand that kind of storm when the storm is just up here in the head. But I do want to acknowledge something here that's really important. We're not having this conversation in a vacuum. The world right now is in its own storm, politically, economically, culturally. There's a level of collective uncertainty that most of us are navigating on top of our personal lives. And that really matters because when the noise outside is this loud, our nervous systems have to work even harder to find quiet. So this is not the time to just white knuckle your way through it. It's not the time to push and force and persevere from effort. This is the time to understand what's happening and learn how to anchor yourself. Each of us has a part and a role to play in how this moment unfolds, not just in our own lives, but in the energy that we bring to our families and the energy we bring to our communities, to our work, to the collective. When we are regulated ourselves, we actually allow people to co-regulate to us. When we are grounded, we give others permission to find their ground also. The personal is not separate from the collective. It never was and it never will be. There's actually a figure from Hindu mythology that I find endlessly illuminating when it comes to this topic of chaos. It's the goddess Kali. Kali is one of the most misunderstood goddesses in the Hindu pantheon. She is often depicted with wild hair, a garland of skulls, her tongue fierce and extended, weapons in her many hands. She's the goddess of destruction, of endings, of burning things down. And to many, she can look terrifying. But here's what Kali actually represents. She destroys what's no longer serving. She burns down the illusions, the outdated structures, the versions of ourselves that we have outgrown. Not out of malice, but because she knows that we're making room for something bigger and better to come through. Kali is not about chaos for chaos's sake. She's chaos in service of what's trying to emerge. When Kali arrives in your life, and she does arrive, sometimes gently and sometimes not. Sometimes it is painful. It's because something needs to end so that something larger can begin. Maybe it's the relationship that's been keeping you small, or just the identity that's no longer who you are, or the version of your work that was built for a chapter that's already closed. It's not the burning that is the tragedy, right? What gets lost in the fire was already dying. What Kali teaches us is that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, chaos is not an interruption of the path. It is the path, and it's the fastest route through. So the question is not about how to avoid the fire, but whether or not you trust what's being cleared so that something new can emerge there. So we're going to take a quick break here, but I want to offer you a couple things here to sit with. Just some invitations here that maybe you want to journal on these a little bit later. You can turn them over quietly in your mind here as we continue as well. But where in your life right now is outer chaos reflecting inner chaos? What's the external noise that's revealing something that maybe you haven't yet addressed inside? Is there something in your life that feels like it's burning down, and maybe you've been resisting it or grieving it? And what could it be making room for? And what would be possible if you stopped resisting it? And what if, well, let me ask this differently. When the storm hits, what is your default response? Is it fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? And what does that tell you about what you might need more of right now for yourself so that you can take care of yourself? We're gonna talk more about this and what's happening in your nervous system. But if this idea of regulation and anchoring is landing for you, I want you to know that going deeper is available to you. I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. But for now, let's just go to break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more about turning this chaos into clarity.
Cut the shit. Stop struggling to feel present. Stop being taken advantage of. Express how you feel and stop making choices based on what other people think. Intuition Unleashed, a revolution in personal liberation podcast, is your go-to resource for combining guidance with mental health and spirituality and solving your questions about why you can't seem to catch a break and find your true happiness. And you can find more episodes at becknelson.com/podcast.
Are you struggling with unresolved emotions or recurring patterns? Tune into Beyond Birth Trauma, From Burden to Brilliance with me, Shannon O'Flaherty, on Transformation Talk Radio. On the second Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, we'll explore your own birth experiences and consider how they might be affecting your current life patterns to start your journey towards self-discovery and healing. For more information, visit shannonbtb.com. That's shannonbtb.com.
We are all born with gifts that we are meant to use to improve the world. Join me, Vicki Todd, and Dr. Pat on Shine Delusion Shine, the radical art of dreaming beyond boundaries, each fourth Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio. Shine Delusion Shine is a springboard to believing, dreaming, and thinking beyond the ordinary and a catalyst to living a more fulfilling, destiny-driven life. For more information, visit vickiworldart.com.
Okay, welcome back to the Flourish Frequency show. And today, here we are talking about turning chaos into clarity. And one of the things that kind of came to mind for me as I was thinking about this episode was really the whole transition of the caterpillar to the butterfly. So I just want you to think about a caterpillar, not the butterfly, not yet, the caterpillar, the one that is pre-chrysalis. It's about to enter the chrysalis. It's about to be in the middle. Because this is the place that a lot of people don't understand about what happens inside that chrysalis. And it's one of the most remarkable things in nature. A caterpillar does not just simply grow wings. It doesn't gradually transform. It's not like a slow makeover. What actually happens inside the chrysalis is way more radical. Inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar essentially dissolves itself. Its body breaks down into what scientists call imaginal cells. How cool is that, that name, imaginal cells? It's kind of like a biological soup that's happening inside that chrysalis. The structures that made the caterpillar, that made it a caterpillar, are what's disintegrating and what's getting dissolved. And for a period of time, there is no caterpillar. And there's also not yet a butterfly. There's just dissolution. And what's extraordinary is that within that soup, there are these tiny clusters of cells, those imaginal cells, that are already carrying the blueprint for the butterfly. They were there the entire time, even in the caterpillar. But it's only in the breakdown, in the dissolution, that they actually get activated, that they begin to organize, and that they begin to build something entirely new. If you could look inside a chrysalis from the outside, you'd have no idea that something magnificent was happening. Instead, you would see the stillness, and you might assume that nothing was going on at all. But everything is going on in there. And I tell you this because I think many of us often go into that chrysalis stage, individually and collectively, actually, and things that used to make sense no longer quite fit. Old structures are dissolving. And the view from inside can feel really narrow. You can only see what's directly in front of you, and it doesn't look like much. That's the caterpillar view. And it's during that moment, or those moments, that time period, that it requires faith. But the imaginal cells are there. The blueprint is there. And the question is whether or not you can trust the process long enough for it to organize. Let's go back to the brain science here for a second, because I think it connects beautifully here to what we're talking about. Your brain receives an enormous amount of information every single second, far more than your conscious mind could ever process. So the brain has a filtering system, a network of neurons called the reticular activating system, or the RAS. I'm sure many of you have heard of this before. It acts as like a gatekeeper or a bouncer. The RAS decides what information gets through to your conscious awareness and what gets filtered out. And I'm sure you've all experienced this. You know, the classic example that I always hear people when they're describing the RAS is about a car, right? You decide you want to buy a specific car. Let's say it's a white SUV. And then suddenly you start seeing white SUVs everywhere. Their cars were always there. Your brain just simply started filtering for them because they became relevant to you. And this is the RAS in action. Now, here's why this matters so much in the context of chaos and clarity. When you are in the storm and when fear is running the show, your RAS filters for threat, for evidence that things are going wrong, for every obstacle, every risk, every reason that this might not work out. You're not making it up. You're genuinely seeing those things. But the thing is, you're not seeing the whole picture. Your filter is set to danger. When you introduce a clear, emotionally compelling vision for yourself, though, something that you genuinely want, something that matters to you, then your filters begin to shift. And your brain will start to organize your attention around possibility instead of threat. You'll start noticing the conversations that could actually be a connection for you. The resource that was always available for you, that was always right there in front of you, that you just weren't seeing before. Or you'll have the idea that's been waiting for you to actually receive it. Vision is something that's so important here. And again, I'm going to refer back to a couple of months ago when we did the episode on U version 2.026, the importance of having a vision. It's so critical because vision doesn't just motivate you, it literally changes what you're capable of perceiving. I always love to reference Napoleon Hill's work here, right? Napoleon Hill wrote Think and Grow Rich. He was hired by Andrew Carnegie to actually write that book. And he spent almost 2 decades studying the most successful people of his era. These were people like Andrew Carnegie himself, Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, Alexander Graham Bell. After all of that research, one pattern emerged above every other one. And he called it having a burning desire. Not necessarily ambition. It wasn't exactly just having an ambition or not just having the hustle and not having a plan. It wasn't about having a burning plan. It was having the burning desire so clear and so deeply felt that it couldn't be extinguished by difficulty, by failure, or by those seasons of doubt that pop up. Edison failed, by his own account, thousands of times before he successfully created the electric light bulb. And when he was asked how it felt to have failed so many times, reportedly he said, "I have not failed. I've simply found 10,000 ways that won't work." What kept him going was not certainty about the outcome. It was the vision of what was possible. Not probable and not predictable, but possible. Okay? I want you to remember that the caterpillar that's going into the chrysalis that has the imaginal cells, like, why do you think they call them imaginal cells? Because you have to imagine it. And with these imaginal cells, we can imagine something possible. Without imaginal cells, we default to what's predictable or what we think is probable. But the imaginal cells help us move into our imagination. At least that's my analogy here with that, okay? Henry Ford was told by engineers that mass automobile production was impossible, and he didn't argue with them about it. Instead, what he did is he held the vision and he told them to figure it out anyways. The assembly lines didn't exist yet. It was invented because the vision required it. I've already spoken about Steve Jobs and the vision that he took to his team, right? That was for 1,000 songs in your pocket. He didn't have the plan. He didn't know how it was going to happen, but he had the vision for it. And we've also got somebody like Sarah Blakely, right? She was selling fax machines door to door when she had an idea for a different kind of shapewear to cut the feet off our pantyhose. She had no background in fashion, and she had no experience in manufacturing, and she had no connections in retail. She was told no by manufacturer after manufacturer, but she held to the vision. And Spanx has since become a $1 billion plus company. The common thread here is it's not about talent. It's not about luck. It's not even about hard work. It's clarity of vision that becomes so real inside of you that your brain begins filtering the world through it. And the obstacles become information. Setbacks become data. And before you know it, the path begins revealing itself, not because it was always obvious, but because now you're able to see it. And this is where chaos, the uncertainty, starts to soften into clarity, okay? One of the most important skills that I think we can develop, especially in times like these, when the world around us is shifting, is the ability for us to hold two things at once. To acknowledge what is without letting ourselves be imprisoned by it. To see what's real and difficult and true about the current moment, and simultaneously at the same time holding a vision for what could be. Not as a way of bypassing the present, but as a way of moving through it with direction. Now, I think it's important to talk about, toxic positivity here, or the spiritual bypassing, right? Because I hear people saying that a lot these days, and actually redirecting away from the vision in fear of being toxically positive or spiritually bypassing. We're not talking about pretending that the storm isn't real. The storm is real. Your current circumstances are real. The world circumstances currently are real. But it's remembering that the storm is not the destination. It's not pretending that the storm isn't real, because it is. It's the weather that you're moving through on the way to somewhere else. The question that can change it all for you when you're in the storm is not a question like, why is this happening to me? Or how can I avoid this in the future? That's where a lot of people go, right? That's because they hook into the storm as being a problem that needs to get solved. We do this. This is part of how our brain operates too, is it wants to solve problems. And in fact, over time, our brains are designed to release dopamine. We get a hit of dopamine when we solve problems, right? And it feels good. It's like, even if it's momentarily. So we lock into and hook into this way of perceiving the circumstances or the situations as a problem that needs to get solved. But if you can actually shift the way you look at it and not focus on what you want to avoid, not what are you afraid of, not what does the current moment seem to be saying is possible for you. That's where the brain wants to go by default, because it's trying to find certainty and comfort. And then on top of it, get that dopamine hit, right? But the bigger question is, what would you love to create? What would you love? That question drops you back into your heart. And it drops you back into your passion and your purpose. And it activates the imaginal cells in a different way, right? Instead of using your imagination to worry about the worst case scenarios, you can use your imagination to actually create a vision of something entirely different. And that question, what would you love, is a powerful compass. And when you orient your attention towards it, not once, but again and again and again, as many times as the storm pulls you off course, your brain begins to do something remarkable. It begins organizing around that direction. Quietly and persistently, the way the imaginal cells in the chrysalis begin organizing around the blueprint of the butterfly. You don't have to see the whole path forward. You just have to know where you're pointed. So a couple more prompts here for you to think about. And then we're going to take another quick break and come back and land this. What is the vision that you keep coming back to, even when the doubt has been loud? And do you have one? What would it mean to acknowledge what is true right now while also choosing to focus on what you want to create? What would that mean for you? What would that look like in one specific area of your life? And if your brain is filtering the world through fear right now, what filter would you want to replace it with? What would you want it to start organizing your attention around? So we're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about how to ride the wave. All right?
Cut the shit. Stop struggling to feel present. Stop being taken advantage of. Express how you feel and stop making choices based on what other people think. Intuition Unleashed, a revolution in personal liberation podcast, is your go-to resource for combining guidance with mental health and spirituality and solving your questions about why you can't seem to catch a break and find your true happiness. And you can find more episodes at becknelson.com/podcast.
Are you struggling with unresolved emotions or recurring patterns? Tune into Beyond Birth Trauma, From Burden to Brilliance with me, Shannon O'Flaherty, on Transformation Talk Radio. On the second Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific Time, we'll explore your own birth experiences and consider how they might be affecting your current life patterns to start your journey towards self-discovery and healing. For more information, visit shannonbtb.com. That's shannonbtb.com.
We are all born with gifts that we are meant to use to improve the world. Join me, Vicki Todd, and Dr. Pat on Shine Delusion Shine, the radical art of dreaming beyond boundaries, each fourth Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio. Shine Delusion Shine is a springboard to believing, dreaming, and thinking beyond the ordinary and a catalyst to living a more fulfilling, destiny-driven life. For more information, visit vickiworldart.com.
All right, welcome back to the Flourish Frequency show. And today we are talking about turning our chaos into clarity and how to do that. And here in this final segment here, I want to talk about another metaphor, actually. You know, I love using metaphors because in particular, I feel like nature has all the blueprints for us. If we really pay attention to the way nature works and the way energy works and we work with it, that it's the metaphor that we need for our own lives. So I want to bring us to another metaphor here. Have you ever watched footage of big wave surfing? Maybe I've got some surfers here in the audience, maybe, but I mean the genuinely big waves, not the kind that you would just casually paddle out to on a summer afternoon, but the kind that rise up like big, massive moving walls of water, 30, 40 feet up in the air. I know there's places like off the coast of Portugal. There's, I think it's called Jaws off the coast of Maui, where the waves are so large that the surfers are actually towed out by jet ski because they could never paddle fast enough to catch them. Here's the thing about big wave surfing that I don't think many people know is that the surfer doesn't wait on the shore and hope that the waves calm down, right? They paddle out towards it, or like I said, they get jet skied out towards it. They position themselves in exactly the right place, not behind the wave, not running from the wave, but right at the point where if they can get the timing just right, then the wave will carry them forward with a force far greater than anything that they could ever generate on their own. And then, this is the part I want you to really picture this in your head. The wave hits and they drop onto the board, and everything in their body has to be absolutely present. They anchor in their core. They stabilize through their legs. Their weight shifts, it adjusts, it responds. They're not rigid. They're not trying to fight the water. They're actually moving with it. They are in constant dynamic relationship with a force that is infinitely bigger than they are. It is by all accounts one of the most exhilarating experiences that a human being can have. And here's what determines whether it is actually exhilarating or catastrophic. Training, presence, and anchor. See, if they haven't trained for it, then they'll be thrown. If they lost their focus in the middle of the ride, they risk being dragged under. The wave doesn't care. The wave is going to do what the wave does. The only variable is whether or not they're capable of meeting the wave. The chaos that happens in your life, it's the same way, right? The personal storms, the global uncertainty, the dissolution that's happening in places that you didn't expect it. That's the wave, or the waves, I should say. And there may be a lot of waves capable of tossing and turning you all over the place. The question isn't how do you stop it? The question is whether or not you've trained to ride with it, whether or not you can actually allow those waves to be adventurous, to feel the excitement and the exhilaration from it. When I talk about anchoring, I'm not talking about being numb to the storms. I'm not talking about forcing yourself into this state of artificial calm that requires you to suppress everything that you're actually feeling. Real anchoring is different. Real anchoring is, it's dynamic, it's not static, right? Like I said, on the surfboard, they're working with the waves, not just standing still rigidly. Think about a ship at anchor in rough waters. The anchor doesn't stop the ship from moving. The ship will still rock. The waves will still come. It's the job of the anchor to make sure that the ship doesn't drift, to keep it oriented, to give it a fixed point that it can always return to no matter how rough it's getting on the surface. That fixed point, the anchor for a human being, it lives in our body. And this is one of the most important things that modern neuroscience has helped us to understand, that our nervous system is the gateway to clarity, to creativity, and to leadership. It's not willpower. It's not just positive thinking, and it's not pushing through. When your nervous system is dysregulated, when it's stuck in the threat response, the higher brain functions that we depend on to lead, to decide, to create, they literally go offline. The blood flow and the neural resources, the attention, they all get redirected just towards survival. You cannot think your way out of a dysregulated nervous system. Let me say that again. You cannot think your way out of a dysregulated nervous system, but you can regulate your way into clarity. And that regulation happens in the body, through the breath, through movement, through sensation, and through the deliberate practice of returning again and again to the anchor. The more that you practice this, the more your body is prepared for the storms when they're coming. And you can move with them instead of bracing against them. Now, I use the term meta leader, right, to describe a very specific kind of person. A meta leader is not somebody who has eliminated difficulty from their life. It's not someone who is never afraid or uncertain or overwhelmed. A meta leader is someone who has developed the capacity to zoom out, to see the larger picture, even when they're in the middle of a storm. And they lead from that wider perspective, from that perspective beyond the current circumstances. That's what the word meta is. It means beyond. Meta leaders are not people who don't feel the wave. They're people who have trained to ride the wave. One of the most consistent things I see in people who navigate chaos well is that they have a practice. It's not about having a certain personality. It's not about having a certain gift that they were born with. It's a practice. It's something they return to over and over again, deliberately, consistently. A practice that keeps them connected to their anchor, even when the storm is loud. For some people, that practice may be meditation. For some people, it's movement, maybe yoga. For some, it's creative expression. Maybe it's time in nature. Or it's the practice of returning repeatedly to a clarifying question. The specific form of the practice matters less than the actual consistency of it. Because here's what the practice does. It trains the nervous system to know that there is a ground to return to. That the storm, no matter how loud, is not permanent. That beneath the waves, that the ocean is still. And that the anchor holds. And over time, with that repetition, with the commitment, that knowledge becomes embodied. It stops being something that you tell yourself, and it starts becoming something that you can feel. The surfer doesn't consciously think through each micro adjustment when they're on the wave. They don't have time for that at that point. Their body knows because the body has been trained, because they've practiced over and over and over again. And they practiced when the waves weren't that intense as well. They worked their way up to it. There's one more metaphor that I was thinking that reminds me as well. It's something that I grew up with when I was little. I'm probably aging myself here, but any of you who are Gen X will probably remember Weebles. Weebles were these little egg-shaped toys. And if you're come from Gen X or what is it, boomers, probably, you definitely probably owned a Weeble at some point. The thing about a Weeble was that it had a defining characteristic to it. You could knock over the Weeble, you could push it sideways, you could tip it upside down, you could send it rolling across the table. And every single time, without fail, the Weeble would right itself back up. And why did it do that? Because of how it was weighted. because of where the center of gravity was within the weeble. The famous saying was, "Weebles wobble, but they don't fall down." And that's our goal. It's not rigidity. It's not the perfect stillness. It's not life without wobbles. The goal is to be weighted in the right place, to know where your center is, to know that it's inside of you and not outside of you. So that when the waves come, and they will come, that you can wobble, that you can move, that you can feel it, and you can still find your way back upright. That is anchoring. That is the capacity that we're building. So I have a few more prompts here for you to kind of help you land around this topic here today. What is your anchor right now for yourself? Not what you think it should be, but what actually brings yourself back to yourself when the storms get loud. And if you don't have one, what's one practice that you could begin this week? I would invite you to join me here for any of my somatic magic breathwork journeys. We do them once a month inside my membership, but you can also drop into those anytime you want. I offer them as a drop-in rate. But I believe so powerfully in the power of the breath. As I was explaining earlier in the segment here, the breath is something that you can use with intention that enables you to get out of that overactive beta brain, the one that wants to go worrying and problem solving all the time, and being proactive to things that gets hijacked by the amygdala, the nervous system, the fight or flight response. When we do breath work and we use it very intentionally, we're able to get out of that overactive beta brain, but we do it with a regulated nervous system at the same time. That opens you up for these bursts of creativity. You don't have to problem solve because you end up creating new things that actually just make problems disappear. It's like a byproduct of it. There's another interesting thing. This is a whole separate topic, but I'll just point this out for a second, that there are studies done that show that when we actually lower the brainwave states in between the alpha and the theta, it's in between those two where we actually receive these bursts of gamma waves. And the gamma waves are where those downloads come from the universe, right? They're the direct connection to source. So I invite you to join me for any of the somatic magic breathwork journeys. If you don't have a practice for yourself, that is a great one to come back to over and over and over again. It's the reason why I do them once a month inside the membership. Another question is, where in your life are you trying to fight the waves instead of learning to ride with the waves? And what would it look like to stop resisting? To start working with the energy of what's happening instead of trying to push against it? And what would it mean for you to show up as a meta leader? Not when things are easy, but in this moment, in this storm. What's the wider perspective that you can keep returning to? So we've covered a lot here today in this episode, and I wanted to just kind of bring it full circle here. We started in the storm. We talked about why chaos arrives, why our brains default to fear when the future is uncertain, when the noise gets loudest, exactly when we are on the edge of something meaningful. Why is it's not a sign that there's something wrong, it's a sign that we're moving and that something real is at stake. And I want to invite you to consider that globally as well right now. Two things can be true, that there can be things that that we perceive as wrong, but also that something more is coming through it. We talked about Kali, the goddess who burns things down, not out of destruction for its own sake, but because she knows what needs to end so that something larger can emerge. The chaos in our lives and in our world, it's not random. It's clearing. And if we can stay present enough to see what it's making room for, something really beautiful can happen. We turned to our compass. We talked about the caterpillar dissolving inside the chrysalis, the blueprint that's already there, the imaginal cells that are already organizing, even when the views from the inside looks like nothing but mess that literally looks like that soup. And we talked about how vision literally rewires your brain's filtering system so that instead of organizing your attention around threat, it's possible for it to begin organizing around possibility. And we talked about having that burning desire. Remember, that's not a personality trait. It's a navigational tool for you. It's the thing that keeps you pointed forward when the storm tries to turn you back. The discipline of holding two things at once, seeing what is real right now, while also choosing to create what could be. And then we talked about the anchor, the surfer who paddles out towards the wave, not away from it, who is trained to stabilize their core, to move with the water, to stay present in relationship with something far bigger than themselves. Where are we doing that in our own lives? When we talked about the nervous system as the gateway, it's not willpower, it's not thinking your way through, but regulation, practice, returning to the body as the fixed point, becoming a meta leader through that practice, and being a weeble. But it actually looks like to wobble and come right back up again and again, because you know where your center is, not because you're a punching bag, but because you're grounded from the inside out. And here's what I invite you to carry with you today. Remember that the storm is not the problem. The storm is the transition. And March, with its lion and its lamb, and its howling beginnings and its soft endings. Nature understands this better than any of us. The wind doesn't stop because we resent it. The thaw comes because it was always going to come. The ground was always going to soften. And we don't just wait for it. We don't white knuckle our way through and hope that it passes. We navigate it. We learn to read the storm. We orient towards what we want to create. We find our anchor and we return to it. Not once, but as many times as we need to for as long as the storm lasts. Because clarity is not the absence of chaos. Clarity is what we accept when we stop fighting the chaos and we start working with it. So just as we're ending here, I want to leave you with 3 things. Things that you can actually do this week, not just think about, but do. First, name your storm. The next time that doubt arrives, the next time that fear gets loud for you, the next time that you feel like your own particular flavor of inner chaos, say it out loud. This is my nervous system responding to uncertainty. This is a signal, not a verdict. Naming it creates just enough distance so that you can stop being swallowed up by it. You don't have to fix it, just name it. Second, write down your vision, not your plan, but your vision, your dream. What do you want to create? Why does it matter? The what and the why, not the how. 1 paragraph, put it somewhere you'll see it every day, and let your brain know what to filter for. This is not just a motivational exercise. It's literally a neurological recalibration. And then lastly, find your anchor. This week, just this week, identify 1 practice, 1 return point, 1 thing that brings you back to yourself when the storm gets loud. 1 breath pattern, 1 walk, 1 moment of stillness, 1 question you ask yourself, 1 thing, and do it. Not because it will solve everything for you, but because you're training your nervous system to know that there is a ground to return to. Storm, compass, anchor. In like a lion, out like a lamb. Thank you for joining me today for the Flourish Frequency show, and have an amazing rest of your month. Come join me for breath work, and I will see you next month. In the meantime, stay grounded and keep flourishing. Thank you for tuning in to the Flourish Frequency show with me, Beth Larsen. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and are leaving with a heart full of inspiration and a mind buzzing with the possibilities of more. Tune in every third Thursday at 11 a.m. Pacific on Transformation Talk Radio for more frequency boosting conversations. And if you want more help getting into your Flourish flow and stepping into the possibilities of more, you can find me at BethLarsenCoaching.com. That's BethLarsenCoaching.com, Larsen with an E.